Cartel Bushnell. In July 2023, a house party in Bath, England, turned deadly when a group confrontation escalated. Cartel Bushnell, 15, participated in an incident that resulted in 16-year-old Mikey Roynan being fatally stabbed. The case exposed how teenage party conflicts and weapon carrying can produce irreversible outcomes. The confrontation involved multiple individuals, with tensions rising between groups at the gathering. Bushnell drew a knife during the altercation, contributing to an environment where deadly force became possible. While a co-defendant delivered the fatal wound, Bushnell's actions in drawing a weapon played a role in how events unfolded. Mikey Roynan suffered a stab wound that proved fatal. Medical responders attempted to save him, but the injury was too severe. The attack lasted only moments, demonstrating how quickly teenage conflicts can escalate from verbal disputes to lethal outcomes when weapons are present. How did investigators identify those responsible? Evidence from video footage and forensic analysis helped piece together what occurred during the party. The footage showed the sequence of events, identifying participants and their actions. Physical evidence from the scene corroborated witness accounts. The group was arrested following the incident. The investigation revealed that Bushnell had armed himself before attending the party, suggesting anticipation of potential conflict. The decision to carry a knife transformed what might have been a fistfight or verbal argument into a situation where death became possible. The presence of weapons changed the calculus of teenage confrontation. Bushnell faced charges and was convicted of manslaughter rather than the more serious charge, reflecting the jury's determination about his specific role. The manslaughter conviction acknowledged his participation while distinguishing his actions from those who delivered the fatal wound. Legal proceedings examined each participant's individual culpability. In 2024, Bushnell was initially sentenced to 9 years in custody. The sentence reflected both the serious nature of the incident and his youth at the time. Judges emphasized the tragic consequences of knife carrying among teenagers, noting it as part of what they described as a plague affecting communities. However, in October 2025, the Crown Prosecution Service stopped the manslaughter case due to evidential changes. The decision to discontinue proceedings came after new evidence emerged that affected the strength of the prosecution's case. The quashing of his conviction represented a significant turn in the legal proceedings. Another case would cross into more disturbing territory at a boarding school. Wei Thomas Huang. In June 2023, students and staff at Blundell's School in Devon, England, were sleeping when 16-year-old Thomas Wei Huang launched a shocking attack. Armed with hammers, he targeted individuals in their beds, striking them repeatedly. The incident would expose delusional thinking that led to attempted harm of multiple victims. Huang attacked 2 students and 1 teacher while they slept, using hammers as weapons. The victims were vulnerable, unable to defend themselves while unconscious. The sustained nature of the attacks, striking multiple times, demonstrated determination rather than a single impulsive moment. All 3 victims survived but suffered serious injuries requiring medical treatment. What drove Huang to such actions? Huang claimed he believed in a zombie apocalypse and had armed himself for protection. The delusion distorted his perception of reality, making him view people around him as threats requiring defensive action. However, the nature of attacking sleeping individuals contradicted genuine defensive behavior, suggesting the delusions provided justification rather than legitimate explanation. When arrested following the attacks, Huang initially claimed he had been sleepwalking, attempting to provide an explanation that would absolve him of responsibility. The sleepwalking defense suggested he had no conscious awareness or control over his actions. However, evidence contradicted this claim, showing he had obtained hammers beforehand and acted with purpose during the attacks. Forensic evidence from the scene established what occurred and the extent of injuries inflicted. Medical reports detailed the trauma each victim sustained. The hammers used as weapons were recovered and analyzed. The pattern of attacks, targeting multiple people in sequence, indicated awareness and intent incompatible with sleepwalking. Huang was convicted of 3 counts of attempted harm, with the jury rejecting his sleepwalking defense. The verdict reflected their determination that he acted consciously and purposefully. Mental health evaluations examined his claimed beliefs about zombies, determining these didn't meet the legal threshold for insanity defense. During proceedings, Huang stated, "I feel very terribly sorry for all 3 individuals," expressing remorse for the harm caused. The apology suggested awareness that his actions were wrong and had caused suffering. However, the statement came after conviction, raising questions about whether it reflected genuine remorse or strategic positioning for sentencing. In November 2024, Huang was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 12 years before parole consideration. The sentence balanced his youth against the serious nature of attacking 3 sleeping victims with hammers. The minimum term meant he would be in his late 20s before any possibility of release, assuming he demonstrated rehabilitation. For the victims, the physical injuries represented only part of the trauma. The psychological impact of being attacked while sleeping in what should have been a safe school environment created lasting effects. All 3 underwent recovery processes addressing both physical healing and mental health consequences of the attack. The judge's decision to name Huang publicly, despite his age, reflected the serious nature of the offenses. Typically, youth offenders receive anonymity protection, but courts can lift these restrictions when public interest outweighs privacy considerations. The hammer attacks' severity warranted transparency about who committed them. Huang came from what was described as a normal family background, with his father working as a financial analyst. The case highlighted how mental health issues can emerge even in seemingly stable environments. The challenge for schools and families involves identifying concerning beliefs or behaviors before they manifest in harmful actions. Another case would involve a love triangle with deadly consequences.
You seem kind of athletic. You play sports when you're in school?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do I really look athletic?
Yeah, you look athletic. Yeah, you got some shoulders on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Fat. Yeah.
Yeah. Get the fuck off.
This is what we do to side bitches.
Bitch.
This is what we do to side bitches.
Janine Gonzalez. In August 2022, Buford, Georgia witnessed a case driven by jealousy that resulted in 30-year-old Ashley Bocanegra's death. Janine Gonzalez, 17, participated with another woman in luring Ashley to an apartment where they attacked her. The case exposed how romantic conflicts can escalate when jealousy consumes rational thinking. The conflict stemmed from a love triangle involving Gonzalez's brother or boyfriend. Ashley had relationships with someone Gonzalez viewed as hers to protect or claim. The territorial thinking transformed Ashley from a person into an obstacle that Gonzalez believed required elimination. The romantic dispute escalated far beyond typical relationship drama. Gonzalez and her co-defendant lured Ashley to an apartment under false pretenses, ensuring she would be isolated and vulnerable. Once Ashley arrived, both women attacked her severely. The beating proved fatal, though that may not have been the initial intent. During or after the attack, they stole Ashley's phone, adding robbery to the harm charges. The sustained nature of the attack indicated this wasn't a brief confrontation. Multiple blows over time suggested either rage or determination, to ensure Ashley couldn't recover. The theft of her phone suggested attempts to delay discovery or prevent Ashley from calling for help if she survived. How did authorities respond? Police were called to the scene, arriving to find Ashley critically injured. Both Gonzalez and her co-defendant were arrested at or near the apartment, with evidence connecting them to the attack. The immediate arrests suggested either witnesses provided information or the scene clearly implicated them. Ashley succumbed to her injuries, transforming the case from aggravated assault to homicide. Medical examination documented the extent of harm inflicted, establishing that the beating caused her death. Georgia's felony murder rule meant that deaths occurring during certain crimes like robbery could result in the more serious charge, even without intent to cause death. Gonzalez faced charges including felony murder, reflecting the combination of the beating, robbery, and resulting death. The felony murder charge acknowledged that Ashley died during commission of a felony, holding participants accountable regardless of whether death was specifically planned. What did family members say about the motivation? Ashley's cousin stated, "Jealousy is the ugly trait to have," capturing how envy over romantic relationships drove the attack. The observation highlighted that the entire tragedy stemmed from Gonzalez's inability to process jealous feelings in healthy ways. Instead of confronting relationship issues through communication or accepting outcomes, jealousy metastasized into deadly action. Trial details remained limited in public records as of available information. Georgia's court system would examine evidence, witness testimony, and each defendant's role in determining appropriate accountability. The case likely involved plea negotiations or trial proceedings that would establish final outcomes. For Ashley Bocanegra's family, losing her to a jealousy-driven attack created grief compounded by the senseless nature of her death. She died not because of anything she did wrong, but because someone else couldn't control jealous impulses. The permanent loss of a family member over a romantic dispute highlighted how disproportionate such outcomes are to their causes. Another case would involve a fatal encounter outside a London restaurant. Hassan Sentamu. In September 2023, Croydon, London experienced a tragedy when 15-year-old Eliane Andam was fatally stabbed outside a restaurant. Hassan Sentamu, 17, attacked Eliane during what should have been a routine meeting. The case exposed how carrying weapons and reacting impulsively can transform minor disputes into deadly encounters. Sentamu had come armed to the meeting, demonstrating premeditation in bringing a knife to what was supposed to be a conversation. The decision to carry a weapon changed the nature of any potential conflict, making deadly outcomes possible. His preparation suggested he anticipated confrontation or wanted capacity to escalate situations. The meeting involved exchanging items, with a bag of belongings at the center of the interaction. When Eliane grabbed the bag during the exchange, Sentamu's reaction was immediate and extreme. Rather than arguing verbally or attempting to retrieve the bag through non-lethal means, he drew his knife and attacked her. Eliane was stabbed multiple times in the encounter that lasted only moments. The number of wounds indicated sustained assault rather than a single defensive strike. Witnesses present couldn't intervene before Sentamu had inflicted fatal injuries. The public setting, outside a restaurant in daylight, meant multiple people observed the attack. During the assault, Eliane begged, "Stop," pleading for Sentamu to cease the attack. Her plea went unheeded as he continued striking. The fact that he persisted despite her begging demonstrated either complete disregard for her life or rage that overrode any empathy or rational thought. Emergency services responded quickly, given the public location. but Eliane's injuries proved too severe. Medical personnel attempted to save her, but she died from the stab wounds. The rapid response couldn't overcome the damage Sentamu had inflicted in those brief moments of attack. How was Sentamu apprehended? CCTV footage captured the incident, providing clear evidence of what occurred. The video showed the sequence of events, Sentamu's actions, and Eliane's attempts to escape. He was arrested the same day, with forensic evidence and witness testimony supporting the CCTV documentation. During trial, Sentamu's defense attempted to argue for manslaughter rather than the more serious charge, suggesting the reaction was provoked or occurred in the heat of passion without full intent to cause death. However, the jury rejected this argument, determining that bringing a knife, the number of wounds inflicted, and continuing despite Eliane's pleas demonstrated intent. The jury convicted Sentamu on charges related to Eliane's death, finding him guilty of the most serious offense. The verdict reflected their determination that he bore full responsibility for deliberately taking Eliane's life. The rejection of the lesser charge meant the jury believed evidence proved intent beyond reasonable doubt. In March 2025, Sentamu was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years before parole consideration. The lengthy minimum reflected both the deliberate nature of the attack and the fact that he had armed himself beforehand. He would be 40 years old at minimum before any possibility of release. For Eliane Andam's family, the conviction provided some accountability, but couldn't restore their daughter. They had lost a young person with her entire future ahead of her over a dispute about a bag of items. The disproportionate response, ending a life over such a minor matter, made processing the loss particularly difficult. The case became another data point in London's ongoing struggle with knife crime among young people. CCTV footage of the attack was used in educational programs warning about weapon-carrying dangers. Eliane's death illustrated how quickly situations escalate when knives are present. Sentamu's lack of remorse noted in proceedings troubled observers. There were no public statements showing regret or understanding of the harm caused. The absence of expressed remorse suggested either inability to process what he'd done or unwillingness to acknowledge the gravity of taking Eliane's life. But another case would involve a home invasion over a dog dispute. Beyoncé Stroud. In March 2024, Leicester, England experienced a case where a dispute over a dog escalated into deadly home invasion. Beyoncé Stroud, 15, instigated an attack that resulted in 40-year-old Gary Belfield's death and serious injury to 21-year-old Luke Williams. The case exposed how teenage instigation can lead to fatal outcomes when combined with false allegations. The incident began with a dispute about a dog, with Stroud seeking to retrieve an animal she claimed belonged to her. The dispute alone might have been resolved through civil processes or negotiation. However, Stroud escalated the situation by making false allegations that provided justification for more aggressive action. Stroud recruited co-defendants to participate in a home invasion, convincing them that the situation warranted breaking into the residence where the dog was located. Her instigation transformed what might have been a property dispute into a criminal enterprise involving multiple armed individuals. The planning demonstrated this wasn't spontaneous, but rather organized action. During the home invasion, co-defendants stabbed both Gary Belfield and Luke Williams. Gary sustained fatal wounds, dying from injuries inflicted during the attack. Luke survived despite serious harm, requiring medical treatment for stab wounds. The attacks occurred inside the residence, with victims unable to escape or seek help. What role did Stroud play specifically? While co-defendants wielded weapons, Stroud's role as instigator proved crucial in making the attack happen. She provided the motivation through false claims, recruited participants, and set events in motion. Legal proceedings examined whether instigation carries culpability equivalent to direct participation in the attacks themselves. Following the attack, Stroud engaged in boasting about what occurred, demonstrating lack of remorse or understanding of the severity. Her words to others about the incident showed pride or satisfaction rather than horror at what her instigation had produced. The boasting provided evidence of her mindset and lack of regret. Evidence disposal attempts by the group indicated awareness that serious crimes had been committed. Efforts to hide weapons, clothing, and other items linking them to the scene suggested consciousness of guilt. However, investigators recovered sufficient evidence to connect Stroud and co-defendants to the home invasion and attacks. Stroud was convicted on charges including causing Gary's death and the attempt on Luke's life. The jury determined that as instigator, she bore criminal responsibility for outcomes, even though others physically carried out attacks. Her role in organizing and motivating the home invasion made her culpable for resulting harm. During sentencing, the judge stated, "Without you, none of this would have happened," emphasizing Stroud's central role despite not wielding weapons herself. The comment captured how instigation can be as consequential as direct action when it sets deadly events in motion that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. Stroud was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term that was later adjusted to 20 years. The lengthy minimum reflected both her instigation role and the serious outcomes of Gary's death and Luke's injuries. She would be in her mid-30s before any parole consideration, having spent her entire young adulthood incarcerated. Another case would involve a park confrontation in northern England. Leighton Ames. In October 2022, Gateshead experienced a tragedy when 14-year-old Tomasz Oleszak died from a stab wound inflicted during a group confrontation in a park. Leighton Ames, also 14 at the time, wielded the knife that ended Tomasz's life. The case exposed how teenage weapon carrying and group conflicts can produce fatal outcomes in moments. The confrontation occurred in a park setting where groups of teenagers had gathered. Tensions escalated between the groups, with claims that one group was following or threatening the other. In such situations, de-escalation through leaving the area or seeking adult intervention represents the appropriate response. However, Ames had armed himself with a knife. Ames carried a knife to the park, demonstrating he either anticipated conflict or wanted capacity to respond to confrontation with deadly force. The decision to arm himself transformed typical teenage group tensions into situations where death became possible. Without the knife, the park encounter might have involved verbal arguments or fistfights rather than fatal stabbing. During the confrontation, Ames stabbed Tomasz in the chest, inflicting a wound that proved fatal. The single stab to the chest area demonstrated how even one knife wound can end a life when it strikes vital areas. Tomasz required immediate medical attention, but the injury was too severe for survival despite treatment efforts. What happened immediately after the stabbing? Ames shouted, "I've wedded your boy," using slang indicating he had stabbed someone. The boasting demonstrated lack of immediate remorse or horror at having potentially killed another teenager. The statement suggested pride or satisfaction rather than shock at what had occurred. His words provided evidence of his mindset immediately following the attack. Tomasz's friends and witnesses attempted to help him, but his injury required professional medical intervention he didn't receive in time. The fatal nature of the chest wound meant even immediate hospital treatment might not have saved him. He died from the stabbing, transforming a park gathering into a crime scene. Investigation quickly identified Ames as responsible. Searches of his digital devices revealed images showing interest in knives, providing context about his fascination with bladed weapons. The images suggested this wasn't the first time he had possessed or thought about knives. His interest in weapons created conditions where he armed himself and used a blade when conflict arose. At trial, Ames attempted to claim self-defense, arguing he felt threatened by being followed or attacked and responded to protect himself. However, the jury rejected this narrative, determining that evidence didn't support reasonable fear requiring deadly force. The fact that he had armed himself before the confrontation undermined claims of defensive necessity. The jury convicted Ames on the most serious charge, finding him guilty of deliberately causing Tomasz's death rather than accepting lesser alternatives. The verdict reflected their conclusion that he bore full responsibility for ending Tomasz's life through his choice to carry and use a knife. In June 2023, Ames was sentenced to life detention with a minimum term of 12 years before parole consideration. He would be in his mid-20s before any possibility of release. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. The next case would take us to a school in Leeds, Bardia Shojafard. In November 2023, Horsforth School in Leeds, England, became the scene of tragedy when 15-year-old Alfie Lewis was fatally stabbed outside the building. Bardia Shojafard, 14, brought a kitchen knife from home and used it to end Alfie's life. The case exposed how teenage fascination with weapons can escalate into deadly reality. Shojafard came from what was described as a normal, loving family, without obvious warning signs that would predict such an outcome. His background suggested no particular risk factors that typically correlate with serious offending. However, he had developed an interest in knives that went beyond casual curiosity into concerning fascination. The interest in bladed weapons manifested through images and materials he collected. This fixation on knives created conditions where he armed himself and brought a weapon to school. The decision to carry a kitchen knife from home to school demonstrated planning and showed this wasn't an impulsive grab of a nearby object during confrontation. On the day of the incident, Shojafard stabbed Alfie twice outside the school. The attack occurred in a location where students, staff, and passers-by could witness what happened. The 2 stab wounds proved fatal, with Alfie dying from injuries inflicted by someone who attended the same school. The confrontation that preceded the stabbing remains somewhat unclear in available details. Shojafard later attempted to claim self-defense, arguing he felt threatened and responded to protect himself. However, the court rejected this narrative, determining that evidence didn't support reasonable fear requiring deadly force. What evidence contradicted the self-defense claim? Forensic analysis established the nature of wounds and positioning during the attack. The 2 deliberate stabs suggested purposeful action rather than panicked defensive reaction. Witness testimony from students and staff who observed the incident provided additional perspective on what occurred. The fact that Shojafard had brought a knife from home undermined claims of defensive necessity. The school community processed shock at having such violence occur on their grounds. Students who witnessed the stabbing required support to cope with the trauma of seeing a peer fatally wounded. Teachers and staff grappled with questions about whether warning signs had been missed and what could have prevented the tragedy. Shojafard was arrested and faced trial for Alfie's death. The legal proceedings examined his claims of self-defense against evidence showing he had armed himself before arriving at school. The jury evaluated whether his fear, if genuine, justified bringing and using a deadly weapon. In June 2024, Shojayford was convicted and sentenced to life detention with a minimum term of 13 years. The sentence reflected both his extreme youth, just 14 when the stabbing occurred, and the serious nature of taking another student's life. He would be in his late 20s before any possibility of release. During sentencing, the judge noted, "Knives have stolen so many lives," emphasizing the broader epidemic of blade-related deaths among young people. The comment placed Alfie's death within the context of a societal problem that claims numerous young lives annually. The judge's words reflected frustration about preventable tragedies resulting from weapon carrying. For Alfie Lewis's family, losing him to a school stabbing created grief compounded by the setting. Schools should be safe spaces where students learn and develop without fear of deadly confrontation. Alfie's death violated that fundamental expectation, occurring in broad daylight at an institution designed to protect students. Provisions allow for potential review of Shojayfard's sentence around 2030, when courts could evaluate his rehabilitation progress and determine if continued detention remains necessary. However, any release would depend on demonstrating he no longer poses danger and has genuinely changed from the teenager who stabbed a peer. Another case would take us to Michigan and a drug-related robbery. Samantha Grigg. In February 2014, Saline, Michigan experienced a case where a drug debt led to robbery and an unintended death. Samantha Grigg, 18, participated with two others in confronting 19-year-old Dustin Frolka over money owed for substances. The encounter would result in Dustin's fatal fall from a moving vehicle. Grigg was described as a musician without prior criminal record, making her participation in the robbery plan surprising to those who knew her. The decision to get involved appeared driven by peer pressure and the need for drug money. Financial desperation combined with poor judgment created circumstances where she agreed to participate in confronting Dustin. The plan involved robbing Dustin to recover drug money he allegedly owed. The group forced him into a vehicle, intending to take him somewhere to complete the robbery. The decision to transport him rather than simply taking items at the initial location escalated the situation beyond a straightforward theft. What happened during the drive? According to accounts, the situation deteriorated as they traveled. Dustin attempted to escape from the moving vehicle, leading to the fatal fall. Grigg later stated, "Dustin opened the door, rolled out," describing how he exited the vehicle while it was in motion. Whether he jumped voluntarily fearing what awaited at their destination or was pushed remains debated. Dustin sustained fatal injuries from the fall onto the roadway at speed. The impact caused trauma that medical responders couldn't overcome. What began as a robbery over drug money transformed into a death investigation when Dustin died from his injuries. Grigg and her co-defendants were arrested following the incident. She was apprehended at an apartment, with one co-defendant stopped while driving the vehicle used in the robbery. Evidence connected all three to the plan and execution, including testimony about their intentions and actions. During interrogation, Grigg provided details about the robbery plan, admitting her role in the scheme. Her statements helped investigators understand how events unfolded from initial planning through Dustin's fatal fall. The confession demonstrated awareness of wrongdoing and provided evidence prosecutors used in building their case. Grigg entered a guilty plea, acknowledging responsibility for her participation in the robbery and resulting death. The plea avoided trial and likely included agreement to testify against her co-defendants. Plea deals in cases with multiple perpetrators often involve cooperation in exchange for reduced sentences. She was sentenced to between 6 and 15 years in prison in 2014. The range meant she could be released after 6 years with good behavior or serve up to 15 years, depending on conduct and parole board decisions. The sentence balanced her cooperation and lack of prior record against her role in events leading to Dustin's death. Based on the 2014 sentencing and the minimum 6-year term, Grigg has likely been released by now, assuming she earned credits for good behavior and programs completed during incarceration. Her reintegration into society after serving time for the robbery and death would involve supervision and requirements designed to prevent reoffending. For Dustin Frolka's family, the circumstances of his death created complex grief. He died fleeing from a robbery over drug-related debt, highlighting the dangerous consequences of substance involvement. While Dustin made choices that led to owing money, those choices shouldn't have resulted in his death during an attempted robbery. While that case involved unintended death, the next would showcase deliberate thrill-seeking.
Eric was my grandson. He was my helper to me and my wife. At this time, my family and I had no intention to forgive the guilty because of such a heinous and brutal crime that was done to my grandson, Eric Rupnerine.
Schaefer took the stand on his own behalf, pleading for leniency. His mother asked for mercy, and a chaplain and a counselor testified that Schaefer is a changed person, has since earned a high school diploma while behind bars, placed there more than 2.5 years ago.
Conrad Schaefer. In July 2013, Osceola County, Florida experienced a shooting spree that left 2 people dead and a community terrified. Conrad Schaefer, 15, embarked on what he described as random attacks motivated by the desire for thrilling experiences. The case exposed how some teenagers seek excitement through causing harm without apparent empathy for victims. Schaefer's father had provided him access to firearms, creating the means for the shooting spree. The parental decision to allow a teenager access to deadly weapons proved catastrophic when combined with Schaefer's disturbing motivations. The availability of guns transformed violent fantasies into deadly reality. Over approximately 2 weeks, Schaefer carried out attacks that killed 17-year-old David Guerrero and 22-year-old Eric Rupnerine. The victims were selected randomly, having no connection to Schaefer beyond being in wrong places at wrong times. David was shot in what appeared to be a random encounter. Eric died during a home invasion, with Schaefer breaking into the residence to commit the attack. What motivated such senseless violence? When questioned about his reasoning, Schaefer indicated he thought it would be fun to engage in shooting people. The chilling statement revealed a complete absence of empathy or understanding about the value of human life. He viewed causing death as entertainment, treating real people as targets in some twisted game. A prosecutor later reflected, "How does a kid come to the point where shooting somebody is an experience?" Articulating the profound question at the case's heart. The query captured society's struggle to comprehend how a teenager reaches a state where taking lives represents desired activity rather than unthinkable horror. The shooting spree ended when law enforcement stopped Schaefer while he was driving a stolen vehicle. His apprehension came after the 2 deaths, preventing potential additional victims. During questioning, he confessed to both shootings, providing details that demonstrated his full awareness of what he had done. The confession eliminated doubt about his responsibility, forcing legal proceedings to focus on appropriate consequences rather than establishing guilt. Mental health evaluations examined whether psychiatric conditions affected his capacity, but experts determined he understood his actions and their consequences. The thrill-seeking motivation didn't qualify as legal insanity. Schaefer pleaded guilty to both charges, acknowledging responsibility for David's and Eric's deaths. The guilty pleas avoided trial that would have required families to endure detailed testimony about how their loved ones died for someone's twisted idea of fun. In April 2016, Schaefer was sentenced to 2 life terms with possibility of parole after 25 years. The consecutive sentences emphasized that 2 separate lives were taken. The parole possibility after 25 years meant Schaefer would be 40 years old before any consideration of release, assuming he demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. Florida's sentencing balanced his youth against the calculated, thrill-seeking nature of the random attacks. The fact that he selected strangers for his fun made the crimes particularly disturbing, suggesting anyone could have been his victim. The randomness created fear beyond the immediate victims' families. Schaefer remains incarcerated in Florida, serving his consecutive life sentences. Another case would involve a different kind of manipulation in New Hampshire. Samantha Heath. In August 2014, Allenstown, New Hampshire, experienced an attack driven by a toxic relationship. Samantha Heath, 18, stabbed 18-year-old Andrea Halverson 16 times in a park and left her for dead. The case exposed how manipulative relationships can lead young people to commit acts they might not otherwise consider. Heath had been in a relationship with an older, controlling boyfriend named Buffum since she was 15. The 3-year relationship involved patterns that observers later characterized as grooming and manipulation. Buffum exerted significant influence over Heath's thinking and actions, creating an environment where she felt compelled to please him regardless of the cost. The attack on Andrea appeared connected to a conspiracy involving Heath's desire to satisfy Buffum's demands. She stabbed Andrea 16 times, leaving her with serious injuries in a park setting. The number of wounds indicated sustained assault rather than a brief confrontation. Each stab represented a choice to continue attacking despite Andrea's suffering. Andrea survived the attack, though she suffered significant physical trauma requiring medical intervention. Her survival meant she could provide testimony about what occurred, offering crucial perspective on Heath's actions and state of mind during the assault. The fact that she lived despite 16 stab wounds demonstrated both medical responders' skill and the human body's resilience. What happened after the attack? Heath fled the scene, leaving Andrea bleeding in the park. However, Andrea was discovered and received life-saving treatment. The investigation quickly focused on Heath based on evidence from the scene and witness accounts. Her relationship with Buffum came under scrutiny as prosecutors examined motivations for the attack. Heath eventually pleaded guilty, acknowledging her responsibility for stabbing Andrea. The guilty plea came with agreement to testify against Buffum, who faced separate charges for his role in orchestrating the attack. Her cooperation suggested recognition that Buffum's manipulation had led her to commit acts she now regretted. During sentencing, Heath made a remarkable statement. "I won't beg for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." The words reflected genuine remorse and understanding that some actions can't be adequately apologized for. Rather than making excuses or minimizing her responsibility, she accepted that she had done something unforgivable. In 2015, Heath was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The term meant she would serve substantial time for the attack, while eventually having opportunity for release if she demonstrated rehabilitation. The sentence balanced her cooperation, genuine remorse, and Buffum's manipulative influence against the serious nature of stabbing someone 16 times. Buffum received an even longer sentence of 35 years to life for his role in orchestrating the attack and manipulating Heath. The substantially longer term reflected court's determination that he bore greater culpability as the controlling figure who groomed Heath from age 15 and directed her actions. Heath remains incarcerated in New Hampshire, serving her 20-year sentence. But another case would involve a tragic game on a Michigan overpass. Kyle Anger. In October 2017, Interstate 75 in Michigan became the site of a tragedy that shocked the nation. Kyle Anger, 17, participated with a group of teenagers in throwing rocks from an overpass onto passing vehicles below. One rock struck and killed 32-year-old Kenneth White, who was a passenger in a vehicle passing underneath. The case exposed how teenage games can have deadly consequences. The group from Clio, Michigan, engaged in what they described as overpassing, throwing objects from overpasses onto vehicles below. The activity represented extremely reckless behavior that treated real people in real vehicles as targets in some twisted form of entertainment. The teenagers apparently didn't consider or didn't care that objects dropped from height onto moving vehicles could cause death. Anger threw the specific rock that struck Kenneth White. The rock came through the windshield, hitting Kenneth and causing fatal injuries. He died at the scene, transforming what the teenagers viewed as a game into a homicide. The randomness of the victim selection, Kenneth happened to be in a vehicle passing at that moment, made the tragedy even more senseless. What happened after Kenneth's death? The group fled the scene, but investigation identified them through various evidence, including surveillance footage and witness accounts. Anger was arrested along with the others who participated in the rock throwing. The arrest brought the reality of consequences home to teenagers who apparently hadn't fully considered that their game could result in serious criminal charges. During interrogation and proceedings, Anger characterized the actions as dumb stuff and stated, "We just weren't thinking." The explanations attempted to portray the rock throwing as thoughtless rather than malicious, emphasizing lack of intent to cause harm. However, the inherent danger of dropping heavy objects onto moving vehicles meant consequences should have been foreseeable. The "we weren't thinking" defense raised questions about whether teenagers truly don't understand such obvious dangers or whether they simply don't care enough to stop. Most teenagers never engage in overpass rock throwing because they recognize the danger. Anger and his friend's choice to participate suggested either remarkable failure of judgment or willful disregard for potential consequences. Anger pleaded guilty to second-degree charges, acknowledging his responsibility for Kenneth White's death. The guilty plea avoided trial that would have required Kenneth's family to endure detailed testimony about how he died. The plea resulted in a negotiated sentence rather than maximum penalties. In October 2019, Anger was sentenced to 3 to 20 years in prison. The relatively short minimum reflected his youth, lack of prior record, and the fact that death wasn't his specific intent even though it was a foreseeable outcome. The 20-year maximum meant he could serve substantially longer if he didn't demonstrate rehabilitation. However, Anger was paroled in 2021 after serving only a few years of his sentence. The early release sparked controversy, with Kenneth White's family expressing outrage that he served such little time for taking a life. The parole board determined he had met requirements for supervised release despite the short period of incarceration. For Kenneth White's family, the light sentence and early parole created profound frustration. They lost Kenneth to teenage recklessness characterized as dumb stuff and not thinking. The minimization of responsibility through such language added insult to injury. His fiancée and children lost him forever, while his killer served just a few years. Anger's release means he now lives with the knowledge that his dumb stuff ended someone's life. Whether he has genuinely processed the gravity of what occurred or continues viewing it as a tragic accident from thoughtless behavior remains between him and his conscience. Supervision conditions likely include requirements designed to ensure he doesn't pose further danger. The final case would involve a Ukrainian teenager and family tragedy.
But your daughter said that your mom attacked her or hit her or something like that, or?
I said, what happened? Why you did it? Why you did it? What you did to grandma? She's courage me. She's courage me. I defend myself. Sophia doesn't look, it's defensive. She handicapped, she's laying down. How it could be bruised? How you defend her?
Sophia Koval. In August 2024, Lauderdale Lakes, Florida experienced a family tragedy when 14-year-old Sophia Koval ended her 79-year-old grandmother, Yevhenia Koval's life. The case exposed how trauma from witnessing war can manifest in disturbing behaviors when combined with disciplinary conflicts. Sophia was a Ukrainian refugee who had witnessed the horrors of war before coming to the United States. The trauma of experiencing armed conflict during formative years created psychological damage that affected her behavior and emotional regulation. She exhibited behavioral issues that family members struggled to manage appropriately. On the day of the incident, Yevhenia had taken Sophia's phone as a disciplinary measure. The phone removal triggered an extreme reaction from Sophia that escalated beyond anything her grandmother could have anticipated. Sophia attacked Yevhenia using the elderly woman's own walker and a belt, turning everyday items into deadly weapons. The attack proved fatal for Yevhenia, who couldn't defend herself against a teenager using her walker against her. The choice of weapons, items designed to help Yevhenia maintain mobility, added a particularly cruel dimension to the attack. The belt and walker represented sustained assault rather than a single blow. How did authorities discover what occurred? Sophia's father reported the incident to police, leading to Sophia's arrest. The fact that family called authorities suggested they recognized the severity of what happened and didn't attempt to hide it. The father's decision to report his daughter demonstrated prioritizing accountability over protecting her from consequences. During questioning, Sophia made a disturbing statement. Helped her die because she was already dying. The rationalization attempted to frame the attack as mercy rather than responding to having her phone taken. The statement suggested either genuine delusion or calculated attempt to minimize responsibility by portraying herself as ending suffering. The claim that Yevhenia was already dying appeared to be Sophia's attempt to justify what occurred. However, nothing suggested Yevhenia was terminally ill or in pain requiring intervention. The rationalization revealed disturbed thinking, where Sophia convinced herself the attack served a benevolent purpose rather than being a disproportionate response to discipline. Sophia was charged as an adult despite being only 14, reflecting the serious nature of the case. Florida's decision to prosecute her in adult court considered the victim's vulnerability, the brutal nature of the attack, and the need for appropriate accountability. Juvenile court limitations might not provide sufficient consequences for taking a life. Mental health evaluations examined how war trauma affected Sophia's development and current functioning. Experts assessed whether post-traumatic stress disorder or other conditions resulting from her Ukrainian experiences influenced her capacity and decision-making. The evaluations would inform both prosecution strategy and eventual sentencing recommendations. In October 2024, Sophia was set to withdraw her not guilty plea and enter a no-contest plea to manslaughter charges. The no-contest plea acknowledged sufficient evidence existed for conviction without admitting guilt. The plea deal likely involved negotiated sentencing parameters. The potential sentencing outcomes ranged significantly. Sophia faced up to 15 years in adult prison or commitment to a juvenile facility, depending on how courts evaluated her age, trauma history, and rehabilitation potential. The decision would balance accountability for taking her grandmother's life against developmental and trauma factors. As of the latest information, Sophia remains in custody awaiting final resolution of her case. The outcome will determine whether she faces adult prison time or receives juvenile placement with treatment focus. Her future depends partly on demonstrating that intervention can address the trauma-driven behaviors that led to Yevhenia's death. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.